So, who was the first king in history? If your mind jumps to the pharaohs of Egypt or a hero from Greek myth, you might be surprised. For centuries, the answer was lost, tangled up in lists of legendary rulers who supposedly lived for thousands of years. But then, deep in the sands of modern-day Iraq, a discovery turned a forgotten name into the first chapter of our history books. These ancient inscriptions don't just tell a story, they give us a name, Enmebaragesi. He's the earliest ruler on the legendary Sumerian King List, whose name appears on an artifact from his own time, making him a top contender for the title of first historically confirmed king. And his story is way more remarkable than any myth. This isn't just about one guy. It's about the moment history itself snaps into focus. It's the moment we step out of the fog of legend and onto the solid ground of archaeological proof. We're going on a journey to ancient Sumer, the cradle of civilization, to see how a few faint marks on a broken pot can change everything we thought we knew about the dawn of power, politics, and human society. Before we meet the man himself, let's set the scene. We're heading to his world, ancient Sumer. Picture a land of brutal, baking sun, carved in two by the life-giving Tigris and Euphrates rivers. This is southern Mesopotamia, what we now call southern Iraq. Around 6,000 years ago, this place was the crucible of civilization. The people who lived here, the Sumerians, were pioneers. Now, they weren't the first people, but they were the first to build what we'd recognize as a true civilization. They were the first to drain marshes for large-scale farming. They were the first to gather in the tens of thousands, building the world's first true cities, places like Uruk and Eridu. They invented the wheel not for your chariot, but for mass-producing pottery. They developed complex trade, and with trade, you need to keep records. So, they invented writing. What began as simple pictures for counting grain evolved into cuneiform, a sophisticated script used for millennia. This explosion of innovation created wealth, complexity, and, of course, problems. Who manages the granaries? Who maintains the irrigation canals? Who leads the army when rival cities attack? The answer that emerged from these bustling, chaotic cities was a brand new idea: the king. But for the longest time, the first of these kings seemed lost to us, their names and deeds tangled in mythology. So where do you look for the first king? Naturally, you'd check the Sumerians' own records. Chief among them is a wild document called the Sumerian King List, discovered in fragments across Iraq. The list claims to record every king who ruled Sumer, one after another, from the beginning of time. It opens with a bold declaration. After the kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Eridu. But as you read on, there's a slight problem. The very first king, Alulim, is said to have ruled for, wait for it, 28,800 years. His successor, Alanga, ruled for 36,000. In total, the first 8 kings before a great flood supposedly ruled for a staggering 241,200 years. Yeah, this isn't exactly history as we know it. It's what scholars call mytho-history, a blend of legend and fact meant to make rulers seem legitimate by giving them a divine ancient pedigree. The list was political propaganda, suggesting kingship was a single institution passed from city to city by the will of the gods. After the flood, the reigns get shorter, but they're still fantastically long. Gilgamesh, the legendary hero, is listed with a reign of 126 years. This posed a huge problem for historians. Where does the myth end and the history begin? How do you separate the gods from the actual guys? For decades, it seemed impossible. What was needed was cold, hard proof, something physical they could dig out of the ground. And in the early 20th century, that's exactly what they found. The breakthrough didn't come from a golden mask or a magnificent tomb. Nope. It came from something much humbler, fragments of an alabaster vase. Unearthed near the ancient religious center of Nippur, these pieces had a faint cuneiform inscription. When scholars translated it, they found a name, Enmebaragesi, king of Kish. Enmebaragesi was an early version of a name on the Sumerian King List, Enmebaragesi. And just like that, a name from the mythic list showed up on an artifact from the period he supposedly lived. This was the bridge between legend and reality. More inscriptions turned up later, but the clearest one is a vase fragment that explicitly names him King of Kish. This is what makes him a huge deal. While early Egyptian kings like Nama are also confirmed by archaeology from a similar or earlier period, Enmebaragesi is the first ruler from the Mesopotamian king lists to step out of the legend and into history. The inscriptions place him around 2600 BCE, in the early dynastic period. The fog of myth was clearing, and we could finally see a real person standing at the dawn of kingship. This didn't just give us a name, it gave us an anchor. It proved the king list had some truth to it, giving scholars a fixed point to start rebuilding the political history of the ancient world. So, who was this guy? Enmebaragesi was the ruler of a city-state called Kish. In his time, around 2600 BCE, Kish was a major power in Sumer. Archaeological evidence shows a flourishing city whose influence spread far and wide. In fact, the title King of Kish became so prestigious that later rulers from other cities used it to claim authority over the whole region. Even his name gives us clues. Enmebaragesi can be translated as the priest who permeates the throne, hinting at the dual role of early Sumerian kings. They weren't just political and military leaders. They were also the chief servants of the city's god. His authority was seen as divinely granted, making him the bridge between the people and the gods. But Enmebaragesi wasn't just a ceremonial figure. He was a warrior king. The Sumerian King List records that he led a successful campaign against the land of Elam, in modern-day Iran, and carried away as he spoiled the weapons of the land of Elam. This wasn't just a raid. It was a major statement of Kish's military might. Perhaps most significantly, later tradition credits Enmebaragesi with building the Temple of Enlil, the chief god of the Sumerian pantheon, in the sacred city of Nippur. If true, this was a masterful political move. By becoming the patron of the most important god's temple, he was elevating himself and his city of Kish above all rivals, positioning himself not just as the king of one city, but as the king of all Sumer. Why does one king from nearly 5,000 years ago matter so much? Because Enmebaragesi is the first domino. His historical confirmation helps us place other pieces of the puzzle. For example, the King List says his son was Agga. A Sumerian epic poem, Gilgamesh and Agga, describes a conflict between Agga of Kish and the famous Gilgamesh of Uruk. Because we have proof of Enmebaragesi, and by extension his son Agga, it suddenly makes it much more likely that their rival, the legendary Gilgamesh of Uruk, was a real person too. Enmebaragesi acts as a historical anchor. allowing us to untangle the timeline. We can see the power struggles between Kish and Uruk not as myths, but as real political conflicts. One interpretation even suggests that Enmebaragesi himself conquered Uruk and may have installed Gilgamesh as a ruler who answered to him. Enmebaragesi marks the point where history as we know it, the study of the past based on written evidence, truly begins. Before him, rulers are shadows. With him we have a name, a title, a city, and recorded actions. His inscriptions are among the earliest royal records anywhere in the world. They represent the dawn of royal propaganda, the first use of writing not just for counting sheep, but for cementing a legacy. His confirmed existence helps shift the timeline. It places one of the world's earliest documented monarchies not in the grand pyramids of Egypt, but on the dusty plains of Mesopotamia. It tells us that before the pharaohs and emperors, there were the city kings of Sumer, and Enmebaragesi of Kish is the first one from their own records that we can be sure of. So, we've gone from myths about kings who lived for 28,000 years to the simple, powerful reality of a name scratched onto a piece of clay. Enmebaragesi's story is a powerful reminder of how history is written. It's a slow, painstaking process where one small artifact can light up a lost world. He was a warrior who campaigned against Elam, a politician who unified his land through religion, and the father of a king who would clash with the legendary Gilgamesh. But his most enduring legacy is that he was real. He stands as the first firm foothold we have in the epic climb to understand our own civilized origins. His existence proves that beneath the myths, there are real people, real power struggles, and a real history waiting to be uncovered. And it all starts to become clear with one of the first confirmed kings in history, Enmebaragesi. If you geeked out on this trip to the dawn of history, you know what to do. Hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that separate myth from reality. And drop a comment below. What other ancient mysteries should we unravel next? Thanks for watching. If you geeked out on this trip to the dawn of history, you know what to do. Hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that separate myth from reality. And drop a comment below. What other ancient mysteries should we unravel next? Thanks for watching.